Omówiono najważniejsze sprawy związane z dalszym rozwojem województwa i kraju.
Detroit, the Motor City, known for being the home of Motown, the music company that put out more hits than Def Jam, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and so many more. Detroit was a place where you could always get a hit, and not always hits of music. Drugs were hits too. Early Detroit had many dependent on its thriving economy. General Motors and Ford supplied a great deal of its residents' finance. People worked, people were proud, and people got paid. An honest job brought about an honest dollar, surely a fair exchange in a changing world. And as with many other cities like Detroit, it had its fair share of racial prejudices. They too had days of song that sang, "We shall overcome." No justice, no peace. Scenes seen all too familiar in cities with blacks all over America. There was war and despair. That would play a part in the making of the city's character. Drugs would also encompass some. Both dealers and users would really be the same. They would walk in the same circles, same paths. The money they got created an underground economy, one that gave a sense of pride. Little as be known to those who carried that pride, it was false. It was often disguised by illegally obtained prized possessions. Those that said, "Look at me, I'm so-and-so, the big man, that nigga from Detroit."
It's getting kinda heavy. Every time a little dog go cop him a Chevy. Roll through the hoods that he knows so good, that he knows so well on every block. It's the hook. That's us. Eliminated the facts. We work hard for the plaque. I'm black. My generation's pulling us back. Clap. I'm addicted to love. Were you addicted to my grub? Addicted to my girl. Were you addicted to cooks?
Richard Carter Jr. comes to Elmwood Cemetery about once a month to visit the grave of his father, the drug kingpin Maserati Rick, who ran a multi-million-dollar crack cocaine and heroin empire on Detroit's east side. Maserati Rick was known across the country for driving flashy cars, wearing the finest clothes, and the most expensive jewelry, even hanging out with celebrities. So it's ironic that he has such a plain-looking grave marker for a man who police say amassed millions of dollars. It's even more ironic when you consider that underneath this simple headstone is this, a $16,000 silver coffin built like a Mercedes-Benz, complete with spinning wheels.
Detroit, 1967. To begin this story, you would first have to begin with the history of Detroit, the condition of the people, and the mindset of one Maserati Rick, a.k.a. Richard Carter.
Next, we're going to turn to an anniversary. It was 40 years ago this week that Detroit erupted in flames, in riot. After 5 days, the city had seen some of the deadliest and most destructive rioting in U.S. history. More than 40 people died in the Detroit riots, 7,000 people were arrested, and at least 2,000 buildings burned to the ground. So what's happened to Detroit since? Well, a photographer who lived in Detroit at the time of those riots recently returned to his city to measure how much or how little progress the city has made in the last 4 decades.
I'm Phil Cherner, and I grew up in Detroit. I was 16 years old, still in high school, when the city burned down around me. I'd never seen anything like it, and I hope I never do again. There were armed troops patrolling my neighborhood, jeeps going by with machine guns on them, and soldiers in full battle dress. I took my camera and wandered through some of the affected neighborhoods. I developed the idea of going back and taking pictures of the same neighborhoods. I wanted to see how they might have changed or stayed the same. The shots on Pingery Street are probably the most graphic. All that was left there, a series of row houses, was the brickwork, a chimney and a staircase. Everything else was completely gone. The city has left this park there. There's a couple ball fields. We even saw some kids playing in it. The old staircase has been dismantled. The concrete steps are now stuck in the ground at an odd angle and used for kids to sit on while they play baseball. Another picture is on a street called Grand River and an intersection of Lysander. There's an old furniture store on the corner. We couldn't find any trace of this intersection at first. Not only was the building gone, it was just an empty field. If you look at the old black and white picture, there's a very distinctive street lamp. Street lamp's still there. I don't know if it works. There were times during the riot where it was too dangerous for firemen to try to put out fires, so things just burned. And when it was all over, there wasn't a whole lot left. It was really living in a battle zone. Checkpoints, tanks, fellas in helmets with M1s over their shoulder. It was scary. There's one kid walking down the block, and I think there's a cat walking through the picture at the same time. And for me, it just emphasized that this wasn't just a ruin and it wasn't just a fire. It was somebody's neighborhood. These were people's houses. One minute they were living at home, and the next minute they were completely out on the street. And I don't know that the city's ever recovered from that trauma.
Yeah, it's all right. I want y'all to know that
At the time of the 67 riots, a young Richard Carter would witness the atrocities that would burn not only his neighborhood, but the images would be burned into his brain. On a normal day in July of 67, police executed a raid on an after-hours spot in a predominantly black neighborhood. Expecting to arrest a small handful of people, to their surprise, was 82 people who celebrated the return of 2 Vietnam vets. Overwhelmed, the police arrested and kicked out patrons. Of those not arrested and kicked out, some tried to find shelter elsewhere. Elsewhere was next door, and upon entering, the police considered that breaking in. All hell would break loose. There would be looting and chaos for 5 days. 43 people would die. 1,189 would be injured, and 7,000 would be arrested. Detroit would hold a history as rich as Alabama, Texas, or a dozen other cities in the South. Detroit would also move on and rebuild. Part of its rebuilding process would be building a new breed of black, illegal, fearless, with names like Butch Jones, Demetrius Holloway, the Chambers Brothers, and of course, Maserati Rick. There was a history with gangsters that ran parallel to the racial problems, and within those waters, they ran deep.
Butch Jones, man, the YBI. That's one of the biggest ones, man, from, hearing them back in the days, how much money they was getting, driving all of the hottest cars and all that, man, you feel me? Right. Real, tight organization and whatnot. YBI was one of them, man. Then I hear another brother, man, Demetrius Holloway. Okay. We hear also, I should have said this before, Sylvester Seal Murray. Okay. He had some ties with the YBI. Of course, we heard about the Maserati Rick. Okay. These were some of the major cats out here out of Detroit, man. They got a whole lot more, man. But one thing about Detroit, man, it's like a Detroit code. A lot of people keep real quiet about a lot of shit out here. You know what I'm saying? Right. You feel me?
Detroit narcotics scene goes back probably about 100 years right now, as documented. Early part of the 20th century, you had a lot of the bootlegging gangs that, although their primary product was the bootlegging of alcohol, they made money and they dabbled on the side of narcotics. Groups like the Italians, the East Side and West Side gangs, as well as the Purple Gang, which was a Jewish mob syndicate that worked in conjunction with the Italians. When Prohibition was over, a lot of the bootleggers and booze barons had to find new ways of making money. So between around 1930 to around the mid-1960s, all narcotics being brought into Detroit were controlled by the Italian mafia. Even the black dealers that were dealing on the streets throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s were all being supplied by the Italians. Around the early 1960s, Detroit had its first unquestioned urban crime lord, a black police officer who was kicked off the force, a man by the name of Henry Marzette, who went by the nickname Blaze. Blaze Marzette was highly decorated undercover narcotics police officer who was the youngest Detroit police officer ever to reach 100 drug collars, and had worked undercover in the drug syndicate in the urban neighborhoods of Detroit from the early 1950s until he was busted shaking down some drug dealers and dealing in some narcotics himself around 1958, I believe. He served about a 2 or 3 year prison sentence and reemerged on the streets of Detroit in the early 1960s and started to consolidate his own organization, as well as fly out to Asia a la Frank Lucas in American Gangster, and arrange his own supply line that was in competition with the Italian mafia, and started getting their own supply source. 1978, a man by the name of Milton Butchie Jones was released from Jackson State Prison after serving a sentence. I believe it was for attempted murder. Came out of jail and created a very powerful drug syndicate in 1978 that came to be known as YBI, or Young Boys Incorporated. Butchie Jones, along with Lieutenants Raymond Baby Ray Peoples and Mark Big Block Marshall, as well as Dwayne Wonderful Wayne Davis, also known as WW, were the 4 main leaders of the YBI, who helped, as I said, Frank Nitty Usher and Harold Morton from Murderers Row develop their own contacts out of New York for a supply line, as opposed to going through the Italians. At that point, the Italians were almost completely cut out of the drug trade by the late 70s, and the Detroit Urban Crime Syndicate was almost completely, self-contained and having their own supply sources. The government came in 1983, I believe, 1982 or 1983, and levied a very wide-scale indictment of the YBI. Over 50 members were taken down in that bust. The remaining members, partially led by Butch Jones's wife, Portia, a woman by the name of Portia Sturdivant, continued the tradition of YBI for the next couple of years, with Butchie giving instruction from behind prison bars, and they were brought down in 1985. At that point, you had a large void to be filled. The area and the country were coming out of an economic recession. People wanted to get high. People wanted to live lavishly, and there was a huge chasm that needed to be filled. And there were more than a few people in this area that were willing to fill it. Around that time, you also had a man by the name of Demetrius Holloway, who was coming out of prison after serving a 5-year sentence for armed robbery, I believe. Holloway had been a protege of Frank Usher and Harold Morton in the Murder Row Syndicate. Holloway, along with his partner, a man by the name of Richard Maserati Rick Carter, carved out a piece of the city and took it for themselves.
The piece of the city they carved was Detroit's east side. Poverty and despair for some, and a way of escape for others. Some would get high, while others would get rich.
I mean, the east side is like, it's like a community of so many different parts of the east side. Okay. It's like Mac, Gratiot, Chalmers, then it's like over there by Outer Drive and Ryan and all that. There's many different sides to the east side.
With my dude, what Maserati Rick goes to the situation is the east side of Detroit, where he came from. The east side is the coldest motherfucking hood in the city of Detroit, period. And when you look at through the world, Detroit is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So if you take the context of, if Detroit is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, and then you got the east side, the most dangerous motherfuckers hood in Detroit, what that tell you? That's where this dude grew up from. That's where I'm come from, the east side, and it's dangerous in the motherfucker.
With the climate of the east side being what it was, what it is, one would have to question what one would do. How to feed his family, how to live. Shit, just how to survive. Maserati Rick would come up with an answer, and his answer would be stealing cars.
Well, when I was coming up, I was about 13, 14. Before he became Maserati, he was a little smooth ladies' man, draped up, hanging out with Tommy now, old Queens on Hopper. I was a little bitty fella. You was real little bitty. And it was just cabin, stealing cars. They was just popping cars and making money off that. And
he used to go out and steal cars, man, and police would come knock on our door and ask for him. And go to the room and arrest him and walk him out the door. It's like they knew who he was.
Practice makes perfect. And in order to be a good car thief, Rick would first need something to drive.
My brother decided to let Rick drive his car. And next thing you know, my brother-in-law's car, the front end was in these people's basement across the street. And, yeah. The front end of the car was across the street in these people's basement. And my mama grabbed Rick, got to beating his ass. And she was like, motherfucker, you gonna do it again, you gonna do it again. And Rick was like, no, mama, I swear I ain't gonna never do it again. So she was whooping him and she hit him across the ear with the belt. And Rick was like, mama, I can't hear no more, So she said, you gonna do it again? Rick said, no. She said, goddamn it, I thought you couldn't hear no more. Man.
And he was also smart in like electricity type of shit, man. Cause he one day, he had a bed. Like he lay on one side of the bed, the lights would come, the lights in his room would come on, and he on the other side, all the lights and TV, all that shit would go off.
Smart motherfucker.
And he used to go out and find broke TVs and shit out in the yard. Out people's lawns, he'll fix them up and resell them. It's just he was just a smart, intelligent, funny type of person.
Rick was a hustler all his life. I mean, Rick would walk down the street and find a toy and fix it and sell it to me. I remember all the way back where when I was little bitty kids, where I was like 10 years old. Rick was like maybe 14. And when my mom would be like, didn't I tell you to wash the dishes? And he'd be like, here, man, here go $20. And he'd be like, Greg, you or Bo wash them damn dishes. And Rick go to the house party. And I'm like, what the hell? I ain't supposed to be washing dishes tonight. But it's a payoff. And that's what he knew all his life. Paying somebody off. Give me some money, and I'm tearing people off.
Tearing people off in the streets is defined as payment, but it could also mean tearing a nigga's ass up. A trait only the strong knew, and one of the strongest Rick knew and protected was Tommy Hitman Hearns. Rick would be his bodyguard, although he was a smaller man. He would tear you off, Detroit style, which in English meant murder. His relationship would also carry to none other than Sugar Ray Leonard. This association with the top dogs of the boxing world would welcome him into their world, and with his welcome, he managed none other than his brother.
I was a professional boxer also. Rick was my manager. I just sat down with people that, well, we sat down and we talked about hundreds of thousands. Hundreds. That's 100. Hundreds of thousands. And I'm like, what the fuck? I didn't think this was possible coming from where I grew up at. I mean, the government cheese, well, we had to slice the shit, and the shit just be this thick. I didn't think shit like this would happen. But Rick made it happen. And Rick was like, Greg, you want to start fighting again? I'm like, I knew what all the money was at in the family. Oh, yeah. And like I said, he was my higher power. Whatever I wanted, I could call him and get it. And when I decided, like in 88, 87, that I was going to start fighting again, he was like, okay, well, I'm finna do this, I'm about to do this, I'm about to do this, I'm about to do this. I mean, I'm talking about contracts. I mean, $1 million fighters. He had the contracts already.
$1 million contracts from a soon-to-be but non-million-dollar nigga was made possible because of Rick's circle. The circle, however, was a circle that first became a straight line. The kind of line many would get into, with a pulse that would monitor death.
This is Channel 7 Action News Brief, brought to you by Mervyn's Department Store. Here's reporter Bill Bonds.
Community leaders meeting to try to formulate a plan to beat the crack cocaine problem in Detroit and all the crime associated with it. But Mayor Young may not take the drastic steps he was talking about taking last night. The latest on that story at 11.
It's 83, and the drug game is in the first quarter. Coach Crack has his players playing straight off the poor people's bench. The opposing team fights back with the intent to finish them, and for every player fouled, one replaces him. Amongst the replacements are 3 players, experienced but amateur and ready to make the pros: Maserati Rick, Demetrius Holloway, and White Boy Rick Wershey. Together, their team would be known as best friends. The best friends would only be friends for so long. As fate would have it, there would be conflicts amongst them that would eventually lead to murder. A rivalry had developed between Demetrius and Maserati. Wershey would be drama-free between the two, as he was necessary because he was the connect, the needed player for the network to grow. Maserati and Demetrius, however, competed for the same thing: who was number one. Maserati, not one for second place, had learned never to be second during his days as a heroin dealer, and like any man, he would be protective of his woman. The streets was talking, and one of the things said was Demetrius was on the creep with a Maserati-branded female companion. This would only complicate the organization and its profits. In addition to the everyday drug dealer bullshit in politics, there would be contests amongst the best friends members. Contests so big, in fact, they would actually name Richard Carter, aka Maserati Rick.
Maserati Rick came about, he was like the youngest black man in Detroit with a Maserati. He had it I believe he had it at the age of 25. But his first car was a Benz. He used to steal cars.
From what I understand, his nickname derived from, I think him, from the stories I've heard, him and Demetrius and a couple other guys around 84, 85 had kind of developed a ongoing jovial rivalry of who could come up with the fattest ride, the car that had with the most tricked out car. One day Demetrius would roll up in a Benz, and Rick would have to come out the next day with a flashier Benz or a Beamer or what have you. But one day Maserati said, screw this, I'm just gonna top them all. And he went somewhere, I heard Ohio, but I don't know, maybe it was somewhere around here, and he got a Maserati and rolled up on these people at a club one day and was just like, it's over with, baby, I win, I'm Maserati Rick. And as a joke, they started to call that night, they were like, Maserati Rick, Maserati Rick. It kind of started off as a joke, but it just kind of stuck. And it's funny because I think a lot of people think the nickname is because Rick Carter could always be seen in a Maserati. Well, I don't think that's true. From what I understand, he preferred Mercedes-Benzes. But just that one time where he showed up and wanted to top everyone and win the contest of who can have the flashiest ride, kind of garnered that nickname, and it really stuck with him. And as a result, kind of even elevated his legacy that was, already, growing.
The legacy that would grow partially because of the Flash, but what would propel his name was his associations, drugs, and murders. The Detroit of Maserati's day was violent, and a reputation of then was based on work, real work, the murder game. And at that time, there were a few who did it better. Rockin' Reggie Brown, Ed Hansard, and Maserati himself. These few would mix, and at some point, the mixture would go deadly wrong. Ed Hansard and Maserati had knew each other and had several dealings prior to their relationship turning sour. Different sources blamed the sourness on different reasons: territory, jealousy, or simply outgrowing each other. Maserati had already made heroin money, real money, several $1 million. Ed Hansard had made his too, but his leaned more towards coke. With the coke of Ed's and the dope of Maserati, they played exactly like the mix in the bloodstream of a fiend, speedballing. And with the speedball effect in the system of both, there would be fights. There were several street-reported scenes of turmoil, but on one climactic day, in front of Maserati's car wash, there would be war.
Point in September of 1988, in front of one of Maserati Rick's car washes that he owned. One of Ed Hansard's men, one of his soldiers, one of his enforcers or bodyguards, that Ed had kind of created his own little army. A man by the name of Lodrick, the hitman Parker, alleged to be Lodrick Hitman Parker. Came up on Maserati Rick and shot him a couple times. I know he got him in the stomach.
Rick shot this guy. The guy pulled up at a car wash, and the guy shot Rick in the stomach. Rick shot him, and both of them went to the hospital.
With Rick shot but alive in the hospital, time would be his enemy. His attacker would lay doors down, wounded as he was, but his attacker would be alive the next day. According to hospital officials, 29-year-old Richard Carter of Northwest Detroit didn't make it this time.
Officials say 2 men were seen near his room when the shooting was discovered.
Really, we don't have a whole lot of details other than the fact that some people saw 2 men. Anybody can visit patients, and there was no restrictions on visiting this patient. There are sometimes restrictions imposed by patients or the police department, etc., and there were no restrictions on this patient.
This is the first time in the hospital's 50-year history there has been a shooting inside. Officials say after today they plan to reevaluate their security measures. A family member who did not want to appear on camera said Carter was shot on Friday while washing his car. She said she spoke to him this morning on the telephone, and he said he couldn't identify who shot him. News of the shooting upset visitors who came to the hospital located at Outer Drive and Schaefer Road. They were banned from visiting patients on the 3rd floor for the rest of the night.
How, what, who, or should we know? Because we're security. How does that happen?
Where's security? How does that happen is a good question. At the time of Rick's death, he had several feuds. Ed Hansard was one, and then there was also one with his one-time friend, Demetrius Holloway.
it couldn't have been nobody like Ed and them motherfuckers. You see what I'm saying? It had to be bigger than that. You see what I'm saying? Because them niggas was small time. How you gonna get past the police and go in the hospital and hit somebody? Huh? Come on now. You can't get past them police unless it was a big time. Let them motherfuckers pass. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, if you got a chance to get somebody, yeah, I agree. Yeah, you get them. Get them while you can. Because they gonna get you while they can. It just so happened they caught him. And they caught him slipping. What can I say? That's the game. To me, that was a coward move, personally. You in the hospital, you recovering from a bullet wound. How can you, it was a coward move. Okay. That's not how you, that was weak.
Rick had done a lot of things in his short life. From his days of a boy witnessing the fires that destroyed Detroit, to becoming a drug dealer hobnobbing with superstars. Yeah, Rick had done it. He had found the way so many inner city urban niggas find. The way we all know the ending to, but say fuck it and do it anyway. Rick was one of a million anybodies who would choose his own path and end up dead as a nobody. But that wouldn't be Rick. Even in death, he had other plans.
Rick used to always tell Mama Betty, right here, Betty Carter, you remember, did y'all get that on the picture, Betty? He used to always tell her, shut up, Mama, you don't worry about it. When I'm dead, you will have money. You see what I'm saying? Remember, he used to always tell her, when she be like, you selling that dope and shit? Wait, man, I don't want to hear it, Mama. You gonna be all right. Don't worry about that, you know? He didn't want to go out like that. He used to tell her to burn it. He used to say cremate. You see what I'm saying? That's all I can remember. Because one day we was upstairs and he came in. And Betty was like, y'all need to go to church. Y'all need to take your ass to church. And because she was a Christian lady. And she used to always tell us to go to church. And Rick, don't worry about me. You gonna be all right. Something happened to me. Don't even worry about it. Just, did you pay that insurance? He's always reminded, did you pay that insurance?
I never think that my brother be buried in a Mercedes casket. You know what I'm saying? Cause he always had a Mercedes. He was like, at 25, he was the first young black person with a Maserati. At 25. But he always had Mercedes. And the way he went out, the way he lived, his lifestyle.
He lived to do everything he wanted to do. He traveled out the country. He bought everything he wanted to have, but he never got to see his children grow up.
He didn't sell out. He didn't let nobody run over him. You know what I'm saying? And yes, he was the gangster. He went out like one and he lived like one. Regardless of what everybody say, you know, people talk, the streets talk, but he definitely lived the real gangster's life, and everybody knows.
And as far as I'm concerned, he was a good guy to me. I ain't never know nothing bad about him. It's just the way they did him, that was some bold shit. It was fucked up, you know. Because he could have went out any other kind of way. He shouldn't have got took out. Because he was a helper. He used to help a lot of people, you know. That's all I remember. He used to always help people. Rick wasn't a bad person.
With the death of Maserati Rick, shit in Detroit was up for grabs. There would be numerous murders in record numbers. Dudes knew money was waiting to be made and nobody was willing to stand in line to get it. Ed Hansford was still calling shots, but he was now facing numerous charges from the feds. Nevertheless, business continued. Rick's one-time partner, Demetrius Holloway, was still around as well, and his pockets put on some weight.
Well, I think some people, like in any situation like that, like you said, there were definitely a lot of mourners, people that he worked with and that respected him and loved him, but then there were also people that saw it as an opportunity for themselves to, again, fill a void that was created. And I think they thought with the end of Maserati, that meant the end of Demetrius Holloway, and that was a big business, a big chunk of the city that needed to be supplied. So I think a lot of people saw it as an opportunity to come in and make a name for themselves in the same way that Maserati Demetrius had made a name for themselves.
The one-time Best Friends organization was all but dismantled, but there were still rumors and whispers in the streets. Sources say orders had come down to eliminate the Maserati era. No one knows for sure if these orders were the result of another organization or from a nigga like Ed Hansford, the prime suspect in Maserati Rick's murder. What is known, however, for sure is the events that took place in broad daylight Monday, October 8th, 1990.
Incidentally, about 2 or 3 years later, Demetrius Holloway was killed in similar fashion when he was gunned down at the Broadway, a popular urban clothier in downtown Detroit. He was talking to one of the salespeople with a girl to his right, and someone came up from behind him, put a gun to the back of his head, and pulled the trigger. From what I understand, there were some people that affiliated with Ed Hansford, and possibly affiliated with Rockin' Reggie Brown from the Best Friends, that basically had a beef with Holloway because he was still around, and they wanted to, get rid of that entire conglomerate that was Maserati Rick and Demetrius Holloway and take over their territory. So in a matter of 2 years, and 2 very violent and high-profile murders, they were able to do that.
The shots that cut down Demetrius Holloway were reminiscent of some movie-type shit. Academy Award-winning murder. 1 shot, 1 kill. All that slick street shit played until this very day. Maserati dead, Holloway dead, and Rick Wershey a rat. Forever sealed Best Friends and planted seeds that would plague Detroit with murder. All the hairstyles, gators, and fancy cars wouldn't remove its murderous past, a past that repeats itself on a daily.
Is Detroit the most dangerous city in America? New crime report says yes, but Detroit isn't taking the news laying down.
Detroit got a serious history of being like a murder capital. A lot of people think about Detroit as being something new, as being the #1 murder capital, Detroit and New Orleans. Detroit been a murder capital.
Around here, it's an attitude like, even if I knuckle up with a nigga right now, you know what I'm saying? If I whoop him, niggas around here attitude be, I'm killing that nigga when I see him. You know what I'm saying? So, shit, man, sometimes it be like that, you know what I mean? But I think that everybody just set in their ways. I don't like to, you can't blame nobody for nobody else's actions, you know what I'm saying? So, like, I just think that, it's just rough around here, you know what I'm saying? And, like, we don't, around in Detroit, man, they don't really gangbang, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's a neighborhood thing here, I'm from the east side, I'm from the west side, I'm from Joy Road, I'm from Schoolcraft, I'm from Linwood, I'm from 7 Mile, you know what I mean? I feel like, it's a lot of dudes that's misunderstood out here, you know what I'm saying? I feel like we've always had, like some salt, like a bad, you know what I'm saying? On just when you hear Detroit or you see you out of town, see a nigga in the D, hey, look, you know what I mean? Even when I'm out of town, like, oh, you from Detroit, you know what I'm saying?
The history of Detroit drugs is crazy. I mean, you got where like crack started and cocaine and all of that situation started. They had a really strong movement on the city of Detroit and the epidemic on Detroit. We were some of the first people. We always grew up on fashion, so the Gators and the serious chains and all that type of stuff was something that we thrived for. I mean, So when cocaine came in and when crack came in, it was like a crazy game. And the history with Detroit is not only is it one area of drugs, you got heroin been here since the 70s. You got fucking the best weed been here since the 70s. Any nigga with a bag can get it off in the city of Detroit. Any nigga. And everybody has been affiliated with drugs in Detroit, from the police to the mayor to the streets to the teachers to everybody has had something to do with drugs in the city of Detroit.
Drugs in Detroit seem to go hand in hand. The profits and proceeds created staggering wealth and exasperated its legal system. 1 out of every 3 young black males have at one time or another had its brush with the law. Ironically, the law and its government seem to run parallel with the illegalities of the city, Detroit City. The corruption of Maserati Rick's day has progressed until today, and one of Detroit's main illegal progressors was its mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick.
Tonight on Nightline, Motor City scandal. Sex and politics intertwine in a mess that's cost a struggling city millions of dollars. Did the mayor fire this police officer for blowing the whistle? The truth is in the text messages.
From the global resources of ABC News, with Terry Moran, Martin Bashir, and Cynthia McFadden, this is Nightline, February 27, 2008.
Good evening. Tonight, sex, lies, and politics. This is the story of a young public official filled with high hopes and good intentions for a troubled city. Just last month, Forbes magazine described Detroit as the most miserable city in America. It has the nation's highest rate of violent crime, the highest rate of foreclosures, and the mayor of Detroit was determined to serve his city well. Until, that is, he used millions of dollars in public funds to try and keep secret his private life. Today, the extent of his cover-up was revealed in court, and the whistleblowers spoke exclusively to Nightline's Vicky Mabry.
I didn't get on my knees and pray to God to get this position, to disrespect my God, my wife, and my children in our home.
It was quintessential Kwame Kilpatrick, Detroit's brash young mayor.
I don't whore around on my wife. And
Back in 2003, denying rumors that he'd had an affair and fired police officers to cover it up.
And I can't wait till the truth comes out.
It's time for all of us to rise up, to rise up, to rise up.
Mayor of Detroit is a confounding mix of qualities. He's energetic. He's a great salesperson on behalf of the city of Detroit. On the other hand, the mayor of Detroit also has a tendency to make really poor personal choices. And the situation we're in right now is an example of that.
The situation involved rumors of infidelity and a wild party with strippers at the mayor's mansion, as well as allegations of abuses by his police bodyguards, charges that they were an elite protection squad run amok.
The mob. It's the Sopranos.
Harold Nelthrop, a 17-year police veteran, was one of the bodyguards in that unit.
The accusations that would accompany the mayor would run concurrent with the city's long list of mobsters. Butch Jones, Maserati Rick, BMF's Big Meech, all well-organized units who at one time or another probably pleaded to God to get off. So it's amazing why Kilpatrick thought he'd do some of the same things and get off.
I didn't get on my knees and pray to God to get this position, to disrespect my God, my wife, and my children in our home. And I can't wait till the truth comes out.
Everybody's truth is different, but ultimately, in the end, it's their truth. One thing, however, makes all truths the same: jail and being guilty.
I lied under oath in the case of Gary Brown and Harold Nelthrop versus the city of Detroit. Case number 033175557NZ, regarding information that was relevant to claims made by Gary Brown and Harold Nelthrop. I did so with an intent to mislead the court and the jury and to impede and obstruct the fair administration of justice. I lied under oath at a civil deposition for the Brown-Nelthrop lawsuit on October 11, 2004 in the city of Detroit. I also lied under oath in the civil jury trial in the Nelthrop-Brown lawsuit in the Wayne County Circuit Court on August 29, 2007.
Kwame Kilpatrick's case is just one example of history repeating itself, being recast in a suit. But just like Maserati Rick, he was cast as a criminal, and although criminal is wrong, they are not to be forgotten. They are stories cast where memories are triggered, allowing one to replay a minute in time and remember an event. In Rick's brother's case, he remembers the pain associated with asking Rick for some money, not knowing he lay dead in the hospital.
The most painful thing is the death, because it hurts me. It's like this. And it really hurt me because it's like I thought he was invincible. I didn't think he could die. Not at that age. And it really hurts me because when I called him, I was calling about some money. It wasn't about I love you. It wasn't about bro, get well. It was about bro, I need a couple of dollars. And it hurt me real bad. And that's really fucked up because I was a grown man then where I could get out and do what I want to, when I want to, like I do today. And it just hurts that I was calling him about some money and not calling him about, is you alright? And when I made that phone call, the phone call didn't go through because he was dead already. You know what I'm saying? He was already dead, and there's many phone calls I could have made to other people. But I was to call him to ask him how he was doing and none of that shit.
Rick knew that he was finna get killed in the hospital because he seen the person. Cause the way my mother was in St. Louis, and he called my mother and was like, his words was, "I love you, that you never gonna see me again, and you straight." That's all he said. And the day after that, he was murdered.
When I seen him, he was telling me to stay out the game. You know, he had a briefcase, silk suit on. Like, nah, I don't want you in it, man. Keep working, you know. I couldn't never get a hold of nothing, so, you know, I laid back.
His death was like, I mean, I wouldn't say I would rather him have died, but I think it's more of a it's more comfortable, I would say, sense of comfort, because he in a better place instead of being on the streets.
minds. Let's go. This is my talent, this is my talent. And most of y'all who ain't feeling me, you are average. This is my talent, this is my talent. And most of y'all who ain't feeling me, you are average. This is my talent, this is my talent. And if y'all are not feeling me, you are average. This is my passion, this is my talent. What is the talent? This is my talent, this is my talent. This is my talent. This is my passion. Why start rapping? Y'all ain't feeling me. This is my passion. The king is back, the team is long. The theme of fact, the realm is ours. You know the game when the game is cards. Whether the game is go fish, the game is large. Whether you gain a focus, the famous stars. Notice that it change your cars, a big commotion. The big promotion that a hang that draws across the ocean and a range of sharks. The arc is open. Like Costa Nostra, that's a game of mobs. I hope you notice they ain't playing with y'all. It's getting ugly. It's thick and muddy, plus the rain that cause a bigger puddle for the lane that cars. We all bundled, we all under. One of the best places we wondered we could get some of because of summer and it's hunger. It got greedy, stole souls for the needy. It ain't pretty when your city be committing all the killings. Youngest thinking admitting it's worth living. The earth listens only to the perfect. If you perfect when it listens, is it worth it when it's worth it? You ain't got a pain in your mind. If I'm in the studio, I'm paying for my time. If I'm in the streets,